Hi, welcome to Blogging Heads TV. This is Culturally Determined. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade, and my guest today is Cathy Reisenwitz. Cathy, could you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I am a writer, blogger, activist, and sex worker. My Substack is cathyreisenwitz.substack.com. I call it Sex in the State, and it is a newsletter about power. And then I'm also on OnlyFans at onlyfans.com/Cathy Reisenwitz. And I'm excited to talk to you.
Well, thanks for taking the time to come on. So we're going to be talking about OnlyFans and maybe some associated topics today. And I think this was in my mind because there was a story in GQ about OnlyFans and people who are content creators, or I don't know what the term of art is on OnlyFans. And I saw that you have one. And you've been on the site years ago when Kevin Glass had a show, and I kind of knew you from there and from just around the web as sort of a libertarian writer, and you wrote about sex and stuff. But I was somewhat surprised seeing that you have your own OnlyFans. Well, there's probably many people in the audience who don't know what OnlyFans is. So could you please define what this website is?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like if Instagram and Patreon had a baby with more nudity. Okay. So what it is it's a social media site. So you go in and you scroll through people's profiles that you're following. The difference is that you can make your profile paywall. So for example, my profile, you subscribe for $10 a month, and then you see all of my posts. And you can also send messages to your followers. And it's a place where nudity and sex are welcomed and acceptable. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, but it's a somewhat new site within the past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, it's been around for a few years and then really kind of exploded. A few things happened. It was shouted out by Beyonce in her feature on Megan Thee Stallion's song. I forget the name of the song, but it was a popular song. Uh-huh. And Bella Thorne is an actress who famously started an OnlyFans, and then pandemic happened, and so it was like a confluence of like everyone's stuck at home, sex workers not able to work, and so they went to OnlyFans, and then people needing new outlets for entertainment, so that brought the subscribers, and it's grown crazy amounts since pandemic.
Right. So I think I can't remember exactly when I first learned about it. Definitely, it would have been within the last 2 years. And I think so. I don't have my own, but maybe I should start. In this economy. But I mainly was something. So actually, there was someone, an organization tweeted a kind of joke or joking on the square line that made me think a lot more about OnlyFans, which was Substack is OnlyFans, but for takes. And then, so I was trying to find who did that, and then it was associated with you. And so I sort of screen capped it, but an organization, like a modeling agency or something, was promoting your Substack. And it seemed like maybe they traditionally are more promoting OnlyFans or something. But I mean, the model does seem somewhat similar because it's sort of independent creators, getting, some sort of subscription. And then I guess maybe are things usually emailed to people, or usually just you have to go to the app or the website to see the content?
I mean, it's kind of like any other social network in that you can opt into email notifications, and then to see the content, you would go to the website.
Okay. So, yeah. So, and within the past year, like Substack has really blown up, especially just in the past couple of months. There's some prominent people who were also on blogging heads back in the day, like Matt Iglesias and Glenn Greenwald, sort of left traditional media purchase to start their own thing for various reasons. And it made me think about how, there's this, I guess it's somewhat well-worn idea that like pornography has been an innovator in technology, and often like porn gets there first and then the rest of the culture catches up to it. and this does seem to be happening. So like VHS tapes or something, or online porn, obviously, online video, pre-existed in the porn world before it, moved on to non-porn stuff. And yeah, so just the idea that like, oh, we're gonna, have a regular exchange of content for being a subscriber, and the subscribers pay. Like that seems like a model that a lot of people outside of porn are moving to now. And so you also have a Substack. Do you charge for your Substack? Do you only charge for OnlyFans? Is it a package deal? How do you separate those things?
Yeah, so my OnlyFans is all paywalled. There's no free content on my OnlyFans. And interestingly, yeah, there's some innovation in the space. Like, for example, with OnlyFans, a lot of people will have like a free profile and then a paid profile, and put different content on each profile. But then AVN Stars is a competitor to OnlyFans, and they allow you to have one profile but make some content paywalled and some content not paywalled. So, for example, like a lot of people will use Instagram as kind of a lead gen channel for their OnlyFans, where with AVN Stars, you can just put all the content you would have put on Instagram on the free setting, and then try to entice people to upgrade. Anyway,
is AVN adult video news?
Yes.
Okay.
Is it? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because there's a famous David Foster Wallace reported piece in which he went to the AVN Awards, and it's in one of his. It's not in. I think it's in Consider the Lobster, and so that's mainly how I know AVN. I will leave it at that. But he doesn't. I mean, he doesn't paint the entire. This would have been probably in the circa 2005 or something. He did not have a favorable view of the industry as a whole, or this particular event that I recall. But yeah, so it sort of seems like would AVN, the fact that they're the sort of the Oscars of the porn industry, as I understand it, are they more sort of people who are already in porn doing this, and then people who are I don't know, not who are like this is their first entree into porn or doing OnlyFans?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely that brand perception of this is where, the people who are already in the industry. But I think that's true of OnlyFans as well. Like, especially at first, OnlyFans, I think, was mostly, sex workers and porn stars. And you've only recently gotten the whole, like, people trying adult work for the first time on OnlyFans. But yeah, I mean, speaking of AVN and fun media, I enjoyed the All Gas No Breaks coverage of AVN as well. It was funny. I don't know. But as someone who is sex positive and someone who creates porn, there's a certain amount of tut-tutting and, finger wagging in all this like kind of normie coverage of the industry. It's right. And it's also difficult to separate the things that are genuinely problematic about the industry, particularly around power differentials and just general squicked outness about sex. So it's almost like it's difficult to find a good critique of the porn industry because, and that's just generally true of like, you have an embattled group of people who's just like, let us work without stigma and criminalization, and we'll work on fixing the industry from the inside. And then you have people who have an agenda to further stigmatize and criminalize. And so there's this pro-porn and anti-porn, and just talking about the realities of porn in a nuanced way often gets put to the side. But to go back to your question about my Substack, it is mostly free because, I mean, my life's work is writing, and I want to change hearts and minds, and putting my work behind a paywall is going to limit the number of hearts and minds it can change. So, but some of my posts that are more personal and less about social change, I do have paywalled, and there is the option to support my work. If you want to upgrade just to support me, that's something you can do if you don't want to see my nudes or give OnlyFans a cut.
Uh-huh.
You can upgrade on my Substack, or you can just PayPal me, however you want to support me.
So, so Glenn Greenwald, left The Intercept, which he co-founded, because he didn't want to be edited. And then he went to Substack, and then all the hardcore Glenn fans can pay him directly, and no one is editing Glenn. And so it's kind of more like, there's been a weird circle of like returning to the blogosphere sort of world where everyone's just doing their own thing, except now there's a very easy way to monetize. Is there some similar parallel in OnlyFans where there's people who want more creative control or are tired of having like someone, I don't know what the exact equivalent of the editor would be, but are there people who are, because most of the stories about this are sort of like, well, I never considered doing it, but then I saw this and then I would try it to make some money. But are there people sort of like are sick of the mainstream porn world and just want to do their own thing, or because of the pandemic, the mainstream porn world couldn't continue as it was before?
Both, and I think one thing that's really interesting about pornography and sex negativity and stigma is that people kind of assume that things are more different than they really are. But I think that actually nearly everything that's true about the so-called like creator economy, or the passion economy, like whatever terminology you want to use, is true across the board, right? So you have the power law where a few people make shit tons of money and everybody else makes almost nothing. Like true on Substack, true on OnlyFans, true on YouTube, like it's true across the board. Right. The trade-offs of you have to build your own distribution without these, entrenched media properties, but then, you don't have the gatekeepers, right? You get to keep a higher percentage of your income and earnings. Like all this is true across the board, no matter what platform you're talking about or what kind of content you're creating. So yeah.
So part of the idea that this world is sort of a winner take all, or like a power law where 10% of the people are making 90% of the money or something along those lines, has been highlighted in some of the coverage of this. And so the story that was in the Times, which we'll link to these stories. So the Times story was from January: jobless, selling nudes online and still struggling. And so that sort of painted it as, there are some people who, young women who got into this having never done it before, and they became super successful, or at least successful enough that they could earn a living during the pandemic from it. But there's many more people who got into it and they weren't able to make a lot of money. And so they have more ambivalence toward it. And in the same way that, Greenwald and Iglesias are able to make $250,000 or something, whereas most people who don't have the huge name recognition or whatever, the clout, could maybe make some extra money or almost no money.
Right. And I think that this is something where the average person has a pretty good understanding that if they like start a blog tomorrow, nobody's going to be, or 10 of their friends maybe will be interested in forking over money to hear what they have to say, but it's going to be a slog. Mm-hmm. Right. But I think that because sex work is so taboo, people really they'll say things like, oh, I should just give up and, be a stripper. That's easy. It's no, being a stripper is none of this is easy money. But I think because it's so stigmatized, there isn't a general understanding of sex work is work. It's a grind. You have to build up a client base. You have to build up an audience. And just, just if I start writing my analysis of world events as someone who has no brand and no differentiating factors, no one is going to care. If I start posting nudes, there's a lot of nudity on the internet. People subscribe to an OnlyFans for the same reason they subscribe to a Substack, because they're interested in that creator, because that creator has a certain hook, a point of view, a differentiation. And I think that the difference is relationship, right? That you subscribe to someone's Substack versus subscribing to the New York Times because you're invested in that particular personality. Like, you care about their point of view. It's a relationship to invite them into your mind on a regular basis. Same for pornography, right? Yes, you can absolutely go to Pornhub and see a variety of bodies, right? But people subscribe to OnlyFans because they're interested in a particular personality, a particular person, and they're having a parasocial relationship with that person.
Right. So I feel like this is the conversation about porn that has mentioned Matt Iglesias more times than any other conversation about porn. But when Iglesias came on blogging us recently and was talking about his Substack, he said it was sort of like going to a concert and buying the band's merchandise. Because you're sort of, in that case, you're paying like $35 for a $3 t-shirt or something, but also you're affiliating with the particular brand. And so, it's not, obviously not an exact parallel, but when you're subscribing to Iglesias's thing, you're both saying, I value his, his takes, his writing, and like, I want to support him as a person who's declared that he's like gone independent, basically. And so, I mean, an obvious question about porn is like, yeah, there's like free porn online. There's as much free porn online as there's like free opinions about whatever online. And so why, if you can get it for free, why pay for it? I guess it would be the like stupid version of that. So you think it's because of the relationship and also like saying, I want to help this particular person?
Yeah, I think the reason you would pay for porn is the exact same reason similar to the same reason that you would pay for a Substack, right? Like, yes, opinions are like assholes.
Yes, everyone has one, and yours probably stinks.
Yeah, if you want to see a random asshole on the internet for free, you absolutely can. If you want to see a random opinion on the internet for free, you absolutely can. But if you want to be discriminating in your asshole consumption and your opinion consumption, then you find the creators that you support and you care about. And I think there's this, I really just think it's super analogous. It's like, I follow Matt, I don't know if I do currently, but I have in the past followed Matt Iglesias on Twitter. And, if he started I would love to see my favorite writers naked. Like, I would, not because I think that they're sexually arousing necessarily, they might be, but it's just because I'm interested in them. I think they're interesting people. That's why I follow them.
Right.
And so I think that.
Go ahead.
No, I just think that it's again, my overarching point is it's way more analogous than people assume because, it's sex. It's like, it's all kind of the same shit. Like, we all are just interested in each other and want to be close.
Right. Are there other people who are doing what you're doing of both like being on OnlyFans and being a content creator and doing some sort of analysis of the general climate? Are there other people who have both an OnlyFans and a Substack?
Yeah, well, Substack, I couldn't tell you, but I'm sure. But actually, the way I got onto OnlyFans was I follow, again, I'm not sure if I'm pretty sure I technically follow Aryeh Girl on Twitter, who's like kind of a thinker. And
right, so she's the main person profiled in this GQ story, which we'll link to. So Aryeh, is that how you say her name? I wasn't quite sure.
I'm not sure. Aryeh is how I say it. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But so she started on OnlyFans, and she had been a sex worker and had made porn years ago, and I knew that about her. And so she got back into the game essentially, and then Caroline Calloway is another writer who is big on Instagram, and then also has written for publications and has started her OnlyFans. And her OnlyFans, like, Ayala's definitely like incorporates her personality and her point of view into her content and Caroline is really into like books and reading, and so she'll like cosplay as literary characters.
Okay, yes,
and
I did. I saw something about that. Yeah, so Calloway is, I mean, there's been like, she's one of the most like written about people of the millennial generation, probably, if you've never heard about her. A very like wild story overall, but I didn't even know. She did something on Twitter where she was like, if I get something, then I'll like show my tits or something. And then like, so everyone was like going around into doing it. I can't remember exactly what she was. Maybe it was subscribers or something or other. And then she did it, and people thought she would get like, taken, like her account taken down or something because she was showing nudity on Twitter. But Twitter, is very poorly managed in all sorts of ways. And so maybe it's still up, but she left it up for a long time. And yeah, it's interesting that, I mean, some people say there's like probably a podcast series that's all about analyzing or something. Some people think she's more on like the grifter side of things. Other people do not, but it's interesting that she's doing that as well. So
to me, like what was interesting is not, I want to make it very clear that I do not support Caroline or Ayala's ideas so much. I think they're both a very mixed bag. It's more that I think that I know that there's this idea in culture, explicit and implicit, that you're either smart or you're sexy. Like you're either, as a woman, like you're either a thinker or a thought. And this to me, like
THOT thought, not
right. And to me, it was just like, I was like, oh, like these women who I associate with their thoughts, not THOT, are naked on the internet making money. And I'm surprised by that, which means even I have internalized this idea that there's this split. And so if I've internalized this idea, like, this is worth fighting against. And I need a way to support my writing because I don't want to charge for it. And so, yeah, so I was like, let's give this a whirl. Like, again, I would like to see my favorite writers naked. Maybe other people feel the same way. And a few did.
So how long have you been on it, and how has the experience been, especially maybe comparing to other like straight media, type of jobs or situations?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quitting my day job anytime soon. It's, I'm in the top like 4 or 5%. I have been on it since May, and it's a really nice side income. To me, like the most interesting thing about it has been, it's been a forcing function to encourage me to examine my own hangups. Like I am a very sex positive person. That's my whole deal. But I was like, I was embarrassed to show my butthole to the internet. And, I had to think about like, somebody could screenshot this and like, put it public, and, like, what would that mean for me? Like, and I had to be like, in my mind, like, I think that that's fine. Who cares? It's a butthole. We all have one. But in my heart, I was just like, oh man, I was scared and nervous. And so it's been really interesting to like all these things that I would have never really had to think about, like to have a reason to think about it in a practical way. Mm-hmm. So that's been really cool for me. I think other things, like one of the things that I really wanted to do was like make porn that I want to exist in the world. And I've done a little bit of that, but not nearly as much as I would like to. And so just seeing like, I mean, a lot of it's obviously pandemic, but yeah, like what are the blockers? Like, why does this porn not exist? Learning in real time, what the hindrances are to making good porn. So yeah, it's been really great. I've really enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. But it's not easy money, that's for sure.
Right. So another time that OnlyFans like broke into mainstream regular news is that there was this story that the New York Post did late last year where they reported on this woman who was an EMT in New York City, and basically outed her as being on OnlyFans. And it was a very strange thing. It was unclear how like any like more like what editor let this go as like having any public news value. Obviously, the New York Post prints a lot of like salacious garbage kind of stuff, but it was essentially just like there's this attractive young woman and she's an EMT and like she has an OnlyFans, and so I think the woman ended up like thinking she would have to resign from her job or something, or it was just a huge mess, and it was very strange. Yeah, so that was sort of like the puritanical side of American culture, like striking back against this stuff. So what did you think of that incident?
I mean, I thought I didn't make this point, but I saw it made on Twitter. It's just like, why is the story not fully employed woman feels like she needs a side job? Like, why are we not talking about the economic realities?
It's someone who is an EMT during a pandemic in one of the most hard hit, places in the country. Yeah. So you definitely could have flipped the frame around and been like, this is why these people need to be paid more.
And that's what's so insidious about sex negativity, is that because it's default, we don't see it. And so, for example, in the New York Times piece that you talked about, the framing was jobless and on OnlyFans. OnlyFans is a job. Like, it's like sex work is work. These people aren't without work. This is what they're doing for work. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there was recently a story where a woman had her kids in Catholic school and the Catholic school kicked them out because they found out she had an OnlyFans. I think the whorephobia in our society, like, first of all, again, like, we need to talk about why people are doing work that they don't want to do. We need to talk about the lack of social safety net. And then when we talk about sex work as being exploitative or whatever, okay, well, create better alternatives for people. But shaming people and kicking their kids out of your school and firing people, that's not pro-woman. That's not going to help the situation. Like, that creates more stigma, shame, and exploitation and more power imbalances. So I think the way that the media covers OnlyFans and sex work is very default, very whorephobic, and hard to pick up on, again, because it is so default.
Mm-hmm. Well, kicking the kids out. So the woman was not connected to the school or the church. Is that just her kids were enrolled there? And
I believe so.
That's pretty wild. That seems like something out of like the 70s or something, but apparently not. So something that just sort of breaking news that happened just today was that Twitter, they didn't officially announce, but they kind of were doing some sort of like investor presentation, and they said that they are planning on introducing something called super followers soon, and so immediately, like the metaphor that everyone reached for was OnlyFans, and so I guess the idea is that basically Twitter will allow users to charge their followers for access to some sort of content, and try to, and I guess take some kind of cut of it. And just as a side note, I've been kind of like half joking, half serious that the way Twitter should try to make money is charge people to tweet, and then that would get like 90% of the people out of there. And then like you would really like if you were like total junk tweets, if people were paying even just like 5 or 10 cents per tweet. But that's kind of sort of a joke, but I do think that you could imagine that model making more sense than like looking at these ads that I don't know how they make any money off these ads, because who would ever click on a Twitter ad and make some sort of purchase off it, except perhaps if they're going to an OnlyFans or some other porn site where they can see attractive bodies. And then a lot of people on Twitter were like saying, well, I'd be out of here. I would never like pay for this shit. and people, I think RIP Twitter was trending at one point. And I would certainly think it'd be better for the world if Twitter stopped existing, given everything that's happened over the past couple of years. But what did you think about this? And as like this sort of model coming coming right now, and I assume they wouldn't let people like make an OnlyFans on Twitter because while there is porn on Twitter, they want it to sort of be like a family friendly or sort of thing. And so it would be sort of like, here's my special joke or something, or I don't know exactly what they envision it happening, but what do you think about this?
I think that I'm of two minds about it. I'm of a few minds about it. I think that the idea of removing gatekeepers is good, and right now the algorithm is kind of a gatekeeper, where what you see depends on what the algorithm wants you to see based on what they think that you're going to engage with and promote. And I think that algorithm-driven news media has been pretty bad for America. I think that we have seen the hollowing out of original news and reporting, and it's expensive to find facts, verify facts, provide nuanced, thoughtful, informed, professional analysis of those facts. Like, oh, that's really expensive and not super profitable, versus outrage, identitarian conflict content, and disinformation, which is extremely cheap to produce and extremely profitable. And the algorithms promote it because it drives engagement. So I think what we have currently is bad, and I would like to see it be less bad. And I think that a situation in which what you see is determined by who you subscribe to could be better. And I think that having people kind of, instead of all shouting at each other in one big Twitter, like, and this is what I kind of see happening, is like people are kind of balkanizing into these little micro-ish communities around certain thought leaders. And I think that in some ways that's better because misinformation travels less quickly and far. And I think these thought leaders are probably better than the algorithms. But I think the negative aspect of that is, one, you start to have a very clear line where how wealthy you are determines the quality of the information and analysis that you have access to, which I think is problematic. And you have a problem of it doesn't solve the problem, and it probably exacerbates the problem of different Americans having access to different facts and based on their tribes and their social groups. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's really hard to have any kind of national unity or shared vision or shared values when the basic facts that you are aware of and familiar with are not shared. And so that's my worry about this balkanization of online communities, is that it will further exacerbate this unmooring of reality where, I mean, frankly, a lot of Americans don't have access to basic facts and have a steady stream of just wrong or misleading information coming into them. And without any kind of centralizing function, that seems like it would get worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the era when everyone sort of was getting the same basic news probably, went out in like the 70s or 80s, or when the cable news started up. And obviously there were always like niche sort of, radio outlets or magazines or newsletters or something. But yeah, I mean, I don't think this, like if we just solve this system, we're still back in like the world of, 1999 or something, where it's like CNN and MSNBC and Fox News and PBS and so it seems to me like sort of the Pandora's box has been opened. And I don't know if we're all ever going to get back to some sort of agreed upon reality in America. Just and like Trump just shattered. Pandora's box was opened, and then Trump like threw it out the window of a skyscraper and it's gone forever. But yeah, I do think I don't know, it's interesting that this model seems to be it's a subscription model. It's as basic as it could be, but it does seem to be attracting some amount of success right now in various worlds: the OnlyFans world, the Patreon world, the Substack world, and whereas the fighting for the most hits so that you can serve the most ads, led to a lot of perverse incentives. And if you look on this is sort of a weird hobby horse of mine, but if you look on a lot of very reputable websites towards the bottom, there are these little strange ads. They're sometimes called chum in the business, and there'll be one actual article from the website that'll be something about you won't believe what this actor looks like now, and then something white woman killed in your neighborhood, and then something about seniors getting a discount on refinancing their homes, and so that is all sort of a weird scam world that even sites like The Nation or CNN or USA Today and all its affiliate local news sites have all that shit at the bottom. And so there's people who are somewhat sort of out of it or confused or something, and they click on it thinking this is legit, and then somehow they're getting someone's trying to scam them. And so if you just move all away from that weird system that seems to Taboola and ad choices, maybe there's another one, but it seems to undergird a lot of serious reputable outlets when it's it's just scam trash. So that if that can go away, because people are just okay, we have to pay some amount of money for this stuff if we want something good given to us, and this world where everything was delivered to us for free if we look at ads, that was a mistake. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I have a lot of thoughts about that. Not about the particular Taboola situation, but I have a lot of thoughts about, I used to be much more of a free market fundamentalist, and I thought, I grew up conservative, and I thought that the mainstream media had a huge liberal bias, and I thought the internet is going to fix the news, right? Because we would get rid of the gatekeepers, and we would democratize it, and we would insert competition into it. A lot of the issue with the legacy media has been that they had monopolies, because a town would only support however many newspapers, and what I realized is, I'm not a market fundamentalist anymore. The internet is not fixed news by any stretch of the imagination. And the problem with the market is that it's made up of people, and people have exploitable cognitive deficits, frankly. And again, one of those cognitive deficits is that if you give someone two headlines, one is confirmation bias, identitarian conflict bullshit, and the other is a well-reasoned, well-researched piece of information that's going to make them a better citizen, they're going to click the clickbait. And if you design a system to reward, to exploit what's already true of humanity, then you're going to just get a lot of bad shit. And I think that's what we're seeing with the news media right now, is that, again, the incentives are just really disaligned against truth, against analysis, against the things that we need to be responsible, useful citizens. And so I think that I don't have the solution. It's probably going to be nonprofit. I don't see a way to make what needs to be made as profitable as clickbait. It's not, I don't see a way to do it, but I think that we're not even fully aware of how bad the status quo is, how much we've lost in that, mainstream media legacy media was not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. It had its problems for sure, but not having any kind of shared idea of facts, like what is true. Like, for example, the reality of the situation is that voter suppression is widespread, systemic, and absolutely determines the results of elections. Voter fraud has not, for the past 50 years, been significant enough to turn elections. And yet, in the conservative media atmosphere, the picture is presented in the opposite of what's true, where if you only consume conservative media, you would assume the opposite is true, that voter fraud is widespread, systemic, and turns elections, and that voter suppression.
In fact, the last election was stolen from President Trump, and if you go to a rally on, in Washington D.C., we can, go to the Capitol and let them know like what we think about this, and they'll be able to fix it.
And I think that people have not connected the dots, that it's this ad-driven, click-based model that caused the Capitol riots. Like, you can draw a direct line, and that's bad. And like, we need to reckon with that as a society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't want to make the sort of pre-internet, pre-clickbait world look great, because it had all sorts of problems of its own, and one of them was the last episode I did talking about the Britney Spears documentary and all the ways that traditional broadcast and print media treated her very, very badly, so that they could get higher ratings and sell more copies of their magazines or whatever. So there's problems all around. So you said something that actually reminded me of another kind of avenue I wanted to at least briefly ask. So you said you grew up conservative, and in this GQ article, I think they profile like 6 or so different people. Almost all of them, it says they grew up in a conservative or religious household, and then for some of them, their family does know what they're doing, and some of them, this woman AL, had, like, her family was like very involved in like her local church or something, and like some person who wanted revenge against her like sent the like a image from her pornography to her father, like on a live stream that he was doing for his church or something insane like that. But is this common? Is there a connection between people who grew up in a conservative or religious family and then they end up being sex workers? Is that just a coincidence?
It would be. I am not familiar with any empirical research on this whatsoever. I don't know, but I do think that there's a connection, and this is really just based on a hunch. I don't have any data, that people who grow up where sex is a big deal, sex continues to be a big deal, right? That doesn't really change about someone. And so you can change your perspective on it, but it doesn't change the importance to you. And I think that you got to keep in mind the people have different levels of sex drive, obviously. People have different levels of just like interest in sex, like as a topic of thought and conversation. And then people have different levels of like sexual flexibility. And so I think that if you combine, like, if you take all the people who grew up in situations in which sex was like a big damn deal, and then you take those people who have a particularly high sex drive from those environments, then yeah, I mean, they would probably be overrepresented in porn and sex work.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, so, there's sort of a pop Freudian explanation you could apply to it of like people who were like forced into repression in their childhood, like, went in the other direction as adults. But it is, I mean, if you think like there's some portion of Americans who are, sex negative and worried about too much sexual influence on their children or something or other. And then if that like ends up backfiring, then that's, I don't know. There's definitely an irony there if all the, daughters of rural ministers are ending up on OnlyFans 20 years later or something like that. Although it's obviously not that extreme, but it is.
Well, it's funny too, because it's like people have, it's not just like religious people, right? Like lots of Catholics like really don't give a shit about sex. Lots of especially like higher church Protestants, like don't really give a shit about sex. Like it's just not a big deal one way or another. And I think that to me, like when I was growing up, everyone who I was close to seemed hung up about sex one way or another. Like it just seemed like a big damn deal. And I also have a higher than average sex drive. And I just thought that everybody else was repressed. And so if anybody wasn't talking about sex and wasn't sex positive, then I was just like, oh, well, you're repressed. And as I've gotten older, I realized, no, a lot of people just don't care either way and aren't very horny. Like it's just not interesting to them, and they don't have a big sex drive, and they're just thinking about other things. Like they're not repressed. It's just not interesting to them. And that was like a really big aha moment for me, and like slowly occurred to me. And I think that if you don't grow up in an environment where sex is a big damn deal, then people for whom it's a big damn deal either way are really mysterious to you. You're like, why the fuck are you going on about this? And for me, it's because people are still growing up in environments where it's a big damn deal and it's bad and it's shamed and it's stigmatized. I'm not after you. Like, you're allowed to not care. Like, go on with your bad self if this is not interesting to you or important to you. But like, believe that for a lot of people it is, and that a lot of people are being brought up in this culture. And I would say that like just default in the American culture, we have this horrible worst of all worlds where sex is constantly pushed in our face and stigmatized and shamed at the same time.
Right.
And that's what I'm fighting against.
Mm-hmm. And that's that you can see that in the Britney documentary also, to get back to that one, because there's this, titillation with her, and all the like interviewers are asking her, or like kind of the male ones are leering at her, but there's also this like revulsion, and there were all these, parents who are thinking that Britney Spears was going to corrupt their children or something, and the fact that she was in this line between, the schoolgirl innocence, but also, sexiness and so forth, like that drove a lot of people crazy in the late 90s and early 2000s. And there does seem, I don't know, as I mentioned in this previous episode, like this podcast you're wrong about, and with Sarah Marshall and Michael something, I can't remember the male host, Michael Hobbs, and they're looking back at a lot of stories from, sort of the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and sort of like re-examining what really happened, and a lot of them involve some kind of young woman and a moral panic around her sexuality or something like that. And so the Britney documentary is sort of the most like mainstream version of this way of reinterpreting recent history of like looking back at the media, and everyone's like, wow, like how did everyone think this was okay to like treat this poor young woman like this? It's just crazy. That
Did you listen to the Jessica Simpson series of You're Wrong About?
I did not.
It was really interesting because it brought up that, Britney got on Mickey Mouse Club and Jessica didn't. And then Britney got signed to a major record label, and then Jessica didn't, because they're like, we already have a blonde virgin sex pot singer. And so, and Jessica Simpson, it talked about like, they read the lyrics of Irresistible, which was her like big breakout hit. And it's all about, it's two Swedish guys writing a song about how, I'm a virgin and I'm supposed to wait, but I just find you irresistible, and how like, no like 16-year-old girl like would have written this. It's just pure like male gaze bullshit. Mm-hmm. And it's you need to be sexy, but you need to be a virgin, and you need to be saving yourself but really horny for me. And like it's just this double bind that women are in that's just impossible to navigate.
Right. And I mean the culture has definitely shifted since then, and there's new there's new novel ways, I guess, that the culture tries to heap abuse upon young women. But maybe that's getting too off topic for this conversation. Is there anything else? I mean, we should wrap it up there. Anything else you want to say before we close out?
Sex is inherently morally neutral. That's the big takeaway. Sex is inherently morally neutral. Pay for your porn. Support your favorite writers on Substack and OnlyFans. And let's build a news media ecosystem that actually promotes and disseminates factual information grounded in reality.
Mm-hmm. So if some people want to check out more of your work in all categories, would you direct them to your website, or is there some other place you would direct them?
Yeah, Substack. CathyReisenwitz.substack.com is where you can read my latest writing, and CathyReisenwitz.com has links to my Substack and my OnlyFans and my Instagram and everything. But it's all Cathy Reisenwitz because I usually get the name without any competition, and I want to be easily found. So,
that's good. So I've experienced this too. There are some advantages to having a unusual name. You can usually grab any particular URL you need. So thanks for coming on, Cathy, and talking about sex and porn and OnlyFans and the media and all sorts of other stuff. And thanks to all of our viewers and listeners, and we'll see you next time.